Hello, welcome to the latest edition of Data in the Hallway. My name is Ray Paik, Community Manager at PingCAP, and joined by my colleague Daniel Van Eden. Hi, Daniel, how are you?
Hello, I'm good. You?
Good, good. And we're honored to have our guest, Leandro Morgado, beaming in from Braga, Portugal. And then three of us had a chance to meet in person, which is unusual this day and age at our favorite conference, FOSSAM in Brussels. And we had a pleasure of having Leandro as one of the speakers in the new Cloud Native Databases track, and you helped us finish strong as our last speaker. Leandro is a senior database reliability engineer at Bolt. I mean, Bolt has been using TiDB several years. So, Leandro, thanks for joining us from I think you're the first guest we have from Portugal.
Well, thanks. I'm
Yeah.
glad to be here. It's good to see you again, although now it's virtually. It's not as good as in real life, but
Right.
that's what you can do.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a pleasure to be here and be able to share some of our experiences at Bolt with
Right.
what we've been doing with TiDB. Yeah, it's been
Cool.
quite a journey, and I think there's
Yeah.
still a lot more to go.
Good. Good. So, yeah, I mean, we talked about. I mentioned FOSSAM briefly. Like, wanted to sort of recap your Bolt's experience with doing data replication with TiDB. I mean, I'll also add a link to Leandro's presentation plus recording. So if people want to review that, they should be able to check that out. But we also wanted to talk about your experience with TiDB upgrades. I mean, that's one of the talk proposals you had, and we didn't have room to accept both topics, so we sort of had to pick one related to replication. So we wanted to talk about your upgrade experience, which is a fascinating one because that's something a lot of any database users have to think about, and it's obviously not an easy task. It's not as simple as upgrading the operating system on your phone. So it takes a lot of work and planning, and yeah, I wanted to share hear some of the learnings from that experience. So
Sure.
yeah.
So a little bit of background.
Mhm.
Bolt is still, we still have MySQL running, but we've been growing. I've been at Bolt for 4.5 years, and we've been growing massively. So we're now at, I think, 200 million users. And this growth rate has brought up some challenges in terms of database scalability. With our MySQL setup, we're starting to hit limits in terms of writes. So we had a couple more instances to scale up to, but we realized that it's going to be, we're not going to have any other higher instances, more powerful instances to scale up. So we decided to look into scaling out and distributing our data. Some of our services actually still have application level sharding, which the developers find painful to maintain. And so we are looking for solutions on what our next generation database infrastructure would be. And TiDB was one of the candidates and the one that we eventually chose. And the main reasons being that since it's MySQL protocol compatible, it meant we didn't have to do a lot of rewriting at the application level. And also it's designed for scale. So we have terabytes of data at Bolt, and some tables are actually, 5, 10 terabytes. And when you want to do changes to this kind of infrastructure or to these kind of big tables in MySQL, it can get quite painful, takes a lot of time. So that was kind of impeding our growth. So we decided to implement TiDB. I think at the time it was version 5. We're currently in the process of upgrading to, we're on 7.1 and 7.5. We're going to be upgrading to the latest 8.5. So yeah, our journey basically began with migrating the data. We had to move the data from MySQL into TiDB, and we actually were quite surprised that TiDB and PingCAP, they provide some very useful tools to do this migration. We're fearful that we'd have to use something like MySQL dump or MyDumper to do a logical dump on MySQL on terabytes of data and load that into TiDB, which would have taken quite a long time. But fortunately, we found out that there's already tools for this. Obviously, we're not the first TiDB user to run into these problems. Um, so the first tool that we used was the DM, which stands for Data Migrator. And this is basically made to read data from MySQL. Both like you can get the data from the schema and also from the bin log, so you can enable replication with that. And this was the tool that we used to migrate all of our clusters so far from MySQL to TiDB. There's some quite interesting things in this DM tool. The thing that we mostly found useful was the ability to merge shards. So we had some like couple of shards in MySQL done at the application level that we decided, okay, we don't need this sharding anymore because TiDB can handle this scale. So DM was actually able to merge these shards with a little bit of filtering magic there and put them into TiDB. Yeah, this is to get data out of MySQL and into TiDB. There's other replication scenarios. I'm not sure how much in depth you want to go. I can basically talk a little bit about them. The other tool that we have is TiCDC, which is basically to get data out of TiDB. So you can read from TiDB, TiCDB, and send it to another MySQL, another TiDB, or in our business intelligence team, it was very important to be able to send stuff to Kafka. So in the MySQL setup, we read the bin log and have the Bezium connector and send those changes out to Kafka for further processing in business intelligence. And if TiDB didn't have that, that would be a showstopper. We'd lose all the analytics capabilities. Thankfully, there is this TiCDC tool that does send stuff to Kafka. I'm not very familiar with the specifics, but the business intelligence team, they're quite happy because it supports different formats like Avro and I think Packet, etc. So yeah, that was one of the enablers for us to migrate to TiDB. Other scenarios that we have is we have TiDB clusters in the same AWS region. So I can go a little bit more in depth when we talk about the upgrades. But the idea is when you're doing an upgrade, you can do the live upgrade in a rolling way without any downtime. I'm talking about major version upgrades, 7175 and so on. But you can't do the downgrade. So I got asked, so what happens if you do the upgrade and then, things start to blow up? What are you going to do? They're like, oh yeah, we can like restore from backup. Wait, but that's like terabytes and terabytes of data. That's going to take hours or even days. So our idea was to create a standby TiDB cluster and replicate from the primary using TiCDC. And in case that we need to fail over, then we could just switch the traffic. We run proxy SQL in front of TiDB, so we have the ability to route traffic there. So yeah, that was one setup also.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, appreciate the like a thorough like a background or like overview of the environment and the reasoning why or where replications were needed. I mean, that was definitely helpful. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll have the links to Leandro's session from FOSM. Like people can definitely check out the slides, and it lists out all these like the scenarios and the tools that Leandro talked about. And thanks for talking about our tools, like I mean, data migration and TiCDC in particular. I could probably add the link to those toolkits as well. Like one of the questions I wanted to ask on DM and TiCDC, once you found them, was it pretty easy to get up to speed on those tools, or were things like documentation pretty helpful, or were there stumbling blocks along the way?
So it wasn't hard, I'd say. The thing is, when a DBA is coming from the MySQL world, if he hasn't had experience with distributed databases, it's a whole new world and it's a whole new way of thinking. So first, we needed to get acquainted with how TiDB works, the whole, different layers, separate compute, separate storage, and that took a while. We're lucky to have some training actually from PingCAP who came to our office. Daniel, you were there, thank you. And they gave us like quick intro or quick boost into the TiDB distributed database world. But once you have those ground concepts instilled in you, then picking up DM and TiCDC is not very hard. I'd say, I don't know, maybe a month to pick up those tools and start playing around with them. Documentation is really good. So we haven't, that's one of the reasons that we switched to TiDB because it's quite easy to figure things out with the great examples that you have online.
Hmm.
Obviously, there are some gotchas. For example, when we tried to, there was another replication scenario that I didn't mention, which was having a TiDB standby cluster in a different cloud region for data disaster purposes. And in that case, latency is higher. So we ran into a problem where we set up CDC replication and lag would never recover. We'd get
Yeah.
infinite lag.
So
Yeah.
that's with one TiDB cluster to another TiDB cluster in a different cloud region, right?
Exactly, that's the setup. So we worked with you actually, and that was one of the gotchas that we had. So it turns out that CDC actually likes smaller feeds. So instead of us replicating our 200 or 300 schemas downstream, we created one change feed per schema, and that helped out CDC to process stuff. It's also quite good if you run into errors or bottlenecks, then you are able to pinpoint which schema the error or the latency is happening in. And also there was a feature released in 6.5, I believe, which was basically you could have your TiCDC nodes separated. So you could have like your primary cluster in region A and then your CDC nodes in region B, closer to where you're writing your data. And that eliminated the problem with latency. So long way to answer your question. Yeah, it was maybe a month or two. With usage, you get more experience, but
Hmm.
yeah, it was pretty easy to pick that up.
Yeah, and you said that you were using a custom sharding, application sharding before. Like, what are the main pain points with doing it like that?
So basically, for example, it wasn't really transparent. So the application had to manage all that sharding. You needed to choose its own sharding key. So imagine you were sharding by city. What happens if your city grows too large? Oh, now we need to reshard, and that meant manual resharding for us as DBAs, creating the instances, splitting the data, copying it across, etc. So operationally, there was a lot of overhead, management overhead for handling the shard, not just for the DBA team, but also for the application team. And the advantages that we had with PingCAP is it's totally transparent for developers. That they don't even know it's sharded. They just see one big, huge MySQL, and they don't really need. Obviously, the architecture is a little bit different. Query plans are a little bit different, but in general terms, they don't need to worry about the sharding. So that was one of the
A-
big reasons.
And of course, if you switch to a different database, like the SQL syntax and protocol should all be compatible, but there might be like small differences. Did you encounter any differences there?
Yeah, a few small ones. The main one was auto increments. So in MySQL, it's a single node and auto increments, they grow monotonically. They're in order basically. Whereas with TiDB, since it's distributed and each TiDB node will give you a range of auto increments, you could have situations where like you do an insert in node one and you get ID one. and you do an insert in node 2 and you get ID 1000, and then you go back and you insert ID 2, and it's not really in order. The 1000 is actually earlier than number 2. So some of our developers were doing it order by primary key or by this auto increment ID, and they were expecting it in order, and they got quite surprised when the order didn't come back. So that was one of the few changes we had to do. One workaround was actually inserting a timestamp and doing the order by a timestamp. In the busy tables, this had to have quite a lot of precision, because second precision wasn't enough because you'd get clashes. The timestamp wouldn't be
Yeah.
unique. So that
Yeah.
was one of the things. Yeah.
I think we also changed the auto increment in TiDB to have an option to be MySQL compatible. So like people that are now doing the migration will not have the same issues, hopefully.
Yes, that's the auto cache ID equals 1. So basically it tells TiDB that you should give one auto increment at a time. That works. It's got a gotcha. That's you need to create the table with this option from the very beginning. So if you have an existing table and you didn't enable this, then you're out of luck. You can't actually change it once it's created. But yeah, that was one of the facilitators that was implemented to have more MySQL compatibility. Other little things, for example, now TiDB is 8.0 compatible. In previous versions, it wasn't. So we did a migration from MySQL 8.0 to TiDB, where we had some problems with collations, UT8 and before collations. So we had to like massage the collation in MySQL before being able to use the EM to migrate it. But yeah, that's been solved. So yeah.
Cool. Well, yeah, thanks for sharing all the details and all the gotchas. I'm sure a lot of the listeners would appreciate that. Yeah, so next want to move on to upgrade. I mean, this is a interesting topic as I mentioned earlier. I mean, us as software vendors love it when people upgrade to the newest and greatest version because we like to talk about our new development. But we realize it's hard, like especially database or like almost like operating system upgrade. It's painful and it takes a lot of work. But I think you mentioned like you started with like a 5.1 maybe of TiDB or 5.x, let's call it, and then you moved to 7.1 and 7.5. Like, what are some of the like some of the favorite like features and benefits that you experience by doing the upgrade? Like, what are the things that that you got the most out of?
It's a long list. So yeah, we started on 5. We quickly moved to 6, I think 6.1 and 6.5, and then 7.1 and 7.5. But okay, one of the things was auto cache ID equals 1. We had some fixes with Kafka. So the Kafka feeding was breaking, and one of the versions fixed that. I don't know, like performance, that helped a lot. We're using a feature called TTL, which basically it deletes old data. So say you have data, our developers weren't cleaning up their data, so the tables will be growing and growing and growing, and that would make operations hard. We have some people that were using in-house systems to clean up the data, etc. But each team was having their own way of doing it. And this TTL feature is quite handy because you can just say, okay, anything older than like 3 months, just drop it, and it'll do this ongoing. So it's good for compliance and to keep your databases, your tables tidy and sanitized. What else? Some improvements with backup, for example. Now there's the ability to do point-in-time recovery with TiDB backups. In the past, you could only do full backups and like incremental snapshots on top of that. You couldn't do a restore to a specific point in time. So PITR backups was we've implemented that, and it's reduced our RPO and RTO. Yeah, I'm trying to remember all the different things. it's been quite a journey. What else? Mm, uh,
And and I think you mentioned you're soon planning to like do an upgrade to the latest stable release, like 8.5. Is that correct? Or
yes, yes,
yeah.
we're working on doing 8.5. There's some features. Oh, one very interesting feature that
Hmm.
we're exploring is resource control. That was implemented, I think, in 7.5. So basically, if you have, one runaway query that's using your resources and making everything slow, then you can actually limit it. You have like resource profiles, and you can attribute
Hmm.
it. OLTP data will have more priority than OLAP. Um, what else? We recently started messing around with TiFlash for analytical kind of queries. So that was quite helpful. In terms of 8.5, um, there are quite a few stability and bug fixes that have been introduced in 8.5. So that's one of the reasons that we want to upgrade. And also, just in general, we don't want to lag behind too much. I mean, if we're running on 5.0, then the kind of support that we get both from PingCAP and from the community would be much less because, hey guys, I'm running 5.0 and nobody's running that anymore. So you'll kind of be on your own there. But yeah, the upgrade procedure, it's also always a bit risky with any kind of upgrade, mainly because some things change, like query plans, they can change. The same workloads, they might behave slightly different from one version to another. So what we usually do is what I mentioned before, we have a standby cluster ready to failover. Also, in our staging environment, we upgrade that first so that developers have a chance to test. But first they do it in the local environment, then they do it on the staging environment with bigger sets of data and data that mimics production, so they'll get uh, valid results. And only then we start to upgrade our production clusters. And obviously, we usually start from the lowest, less important clusters with less workloads and move our way on to the more important ones.
And are you combining this with OS upgrades or not?
No, we prefer to do one change at a time because, well, if we do OS upgrades and TiDB upgrades at the same time and something breaks or goes wrong, that will make the troubleshooting much harder because then you have to like, was it the OS? Was it TiDB? So yeah, another
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I think that's a very good practice.
So yeah, another thing that we do is we usually shy away from the .0 releases. I know it's probably not good advertisement for PingCAP, but so 7.50 is out. We'll wait a little bit until 7.51 is out, just because we don't like to be that brave and courageous. We can't afford windows of downtime, so we play it quite safe with that. Yeah. I just remembered a very good feature that was added in recent TiDB versions was adding indexes, DDL adding indexes. I remember like a 1 TB table would take a day to add an index. And with the upgrade version, it went down to like an hour. So like 10,
That's
20
a massive
times.
difference.
Exactly. So with upgrading, you get operational advantages, and basically your life just becomes a little bit easier than with the old ones. So but yeah, that's well um, upgrade procedures.
Yeah.
Do a lot of testing, enable your developers to have infrastructure to do that, and just be careful and have a plan B ready to move on to in case things go south.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the challenges with your business, I think for people in outside of Europe may not be very familiar with Bolt, but it's sort of like Uber, like you can hail rides, bikes, scooters. I think you can even order food. So significant downtime is not necessarily an option. You're not just like, like other sites where you're just tracking packages. If you're down for a while, it's not a big deal. But for your business, that's not really an option. Like, or I mean, you'll get a lot of upset customers all
Yeah.
across Europe, especially. So
Well,
yeah,
I'll be honest, we've had
yeah,
downtimes, we're not
yeah,
perfect, and we've seen
sure.
the consequences of that, in terms
Hmm.
of ride hailing. Both the drivers couldn't earn any money. They'll be sitting
Hmm.
there waiting, don't have any jobs. And also
Hmm.
the people that rely on us for transportation, they couldn't get rides. So it's
Right,
very disruptive. On the food side, it's even worse because, the restaurant is preparing your meal and nobody's there to pick it up. The same thing with
right.
the if the customer who's hungry, like, "Where's my pizza?" And
Yeah.
no pizza shows up. So yeah, it's quite a challenge not having any downtime windows, but it's what makes you learn and progress, and that's why we seek tools that can help us with this mission.
Yeah, and I think Ray said that like it's mainly Europe, but I also remember using Bolt in South America. I think you guys also do Africa, right?
Yeah, our main markets is Europe and Africa. Now we're starting to expand a little bit into the Americas. So I think Paraguay. I'm not exactly sure, but I think it's Paraguay and Mexico. Maybe there's a couple of countries in South America that we are expanding to. Also, Southeast Asia, like Thailand. We're starting to operate there. And the latest ones under a different brand, actually, in North America, in Canada and Washington. I think they're going to have scooters there. In Canada, we're operating under the HOP, HOPP brand, basically because, do you know Usain Bolt, the Jamaican runner?
Hmm.
Yeah.
He had a ride-hailing company in North America called Bolt that has the copyright and trademark for this, so we couldn't use it. So
Right.
yeah, that's one of the reasons. Yeah, but
Cool.
we're expanding quite
Yeah,
a
I
lot.
mean, hopefully our database will be able will support your growth as you grow. So cool.
Yes,
Yeah,
it's made my life and my team's life much easier.
cool.
Scaling things, it's hard to explain unless you live it. But MySQL, while it's very good and it's quite good for read scalability, for writes, it can't really do write scalability unless you manually shard your data. So that's something we didn't want to do,
Hmm.
and that's a big problem that TiDB solved for us.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, I mean, thanks for talking to us about your experience with TiDB replication and upgrade. And as I mentioned, we'll have a webinar in March of 2025. Like if you can't make the webinar at that time slot, you should be able to watch the recording with slides. So I'll put the information there on the webinar. So we reached the end of the episode, and we have tradition. We have guests from all over the world. I mean, like I said, like you're Leandro, you're our first guest from Portugal, specifically in city called Braga. Uh, I wanted, is there something you want to share about Braga that people may not know about? For hopefully people who weren't familiar with the city may get to know a little factoid and get to look it up.
Yeah, sure. Well, Braga, it's Lisbon. Everybody asks me, so you're from Portugal, Lisbon, right? No, 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 it's Braga. Where? Porto? No, no. It's even though it's the third city in the country, it's not very well known, so to speak. It's starting to get there, but yeah, people still don't know it a lot. But I do encourage you to come and visit. It's quite a charming little town with lots of pedestrian area that you can walk around in without cars, and there's like shops and lots of churches. The city is 2,000 years old. It was founded by the Romans. So we actually have like the oldest cathedral in Portugal, also nearly 2,000 years old. And yeah, there's quite some interesting things. We have the beach close by. We have the Jerez Mountains on the other side. So we're in between beach and mountain. And there's some nice things. Don't miss out on Bon Jesus, which is well, look it up. We can put something in the notes, but it's quite a mountain resort with gardens and churches and a popular hangout spot. And also don't miss our food because yeah, you have to come here and try it.
Yeah,
But we have some quite nice codfish dishes and meat dishes, and yeah, I encourage you to come and have a visit.
cool.
And yeah, if you're around,
Yeah.
you're
So,
welcome to look
so
me up also.
sounds lovely. I'm sure it's a lot less crowded than like other cities like Porto and Lisbon that you mentioned. So which I
Yeah.
typically enjoy. Like you don't have to deal with to compete with other tourists. So
Yeah, and you
cool.
can visit it in like 1, 2 days. You
Yeah,
can get a good overview of the city. So yeah.
cool. All right. Well, thanks very much, Leandro. Was certainly nice meeting you and Fazem, and like hopefully our paths will cross again. So,
I'm sure it will. Thanks
yeah,
for having me and
yeah,
giving me the opportunity to share the experience with Bolt.
yeah,
And yeah, I hope to see you guys somewhere sometime soon.
yeah.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you.